China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency. It will all work out well, in particular on behalf of the American people. I want to thank President Xi.
Whatever happens, we're totally prepared. It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear. The China virus, the China plague.
Kung Flu.
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
I really wish that we could bring people into the hospitals and just for a few minutes show the kind of agony that we're seeing.
This is a battlefield, and we've turned ourselves from nurses into soldiers.
We're the epicenter of the world, and it's a direct result of the policy decisions that have been made.
And we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
America will start winning again, winning like never before.
The Trump administration's first real warning came the week before he took office. Obama's outgoing team and Trump's senior staff held a meeting to assess whether the U.S. would be prepared to handle a pandemic.
A week before Donald Trump took office, Obama officials prepared a briefing for the incoming president's top aides, a rundown of the threats the new administration might face.
So it's terrorism, it's cybersecurity, it's bioterrorism, it's those kinds of things. But one of the pieces that was put specifically into this was a pandemic exactly of the type that the coronavirus pandemic turned out to be. A brand new virus that nobody had ever seen before, and for which a vaccine would be far into the future.
Nobody knew there'd be a pandemic or an epidemic of this proportion. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before. This came out of nowhere. Came out of nowhere.
President Trump has said over and over, nobody saw this coming, we couldn't have been prepared. If you look closely at statements his own health officials were making, Secretary Azar was asked, what keeps you up at night? And he said a pandemic flu event.
We lost 80,000 Americans just last year from the annual flu. I mean, imagine pandemic.
But Trump came into office with other priorities. And in 2018, like Obama and Bush before, he disbanded the National Security Council's Office on Global Health.
Within his first 100 days in office, Trump was briefed on the pandemic playbook. For 3 years, the White House had been ignoring warnings from experts and predecessors. It had also been dismantling the federal system designed to protect us from global pandemics. That system is made up of federal agencies that work together across 50 states, and it needs resources, coordination, and good leadership to function well during a fast-moving outbreak. On his second full day in office, Trump put in place a federal hiring freeze. Critical government positions in the federal pandemic response system remained vacant, some for months, others for years. 18 months into office, Trump had only appointed 25 of 83 science-based positions.
I'm a business person. I don't like having thousands of people around when you don't need them.
Nowhere was Trump's distrust of expertise and institutional knowledge more apparent than in his approach to the CDC. The CDC leads U.S. pandemic preparedness and response. It tracks and studies infectious diseases, and it works with other agencies at the federal and local levels to respond to outbreaks and keep the public informed. Trump also removed the Strategic National Stockpile from the CDC's oversight for the first time in 20 years. The stockpile is a repository of critical medical supplies for when states run low in emergencies. The CDC's presence in hotspot countries like China is particularly important. The agency is our eyes and ears on the ground. The CDC team based in China shrunk from 47 staffers to 14. The Trump administration ended a $200 million pandemic early warning program called PREDICT, which focused on monitoring emerging diseases in China and other high-risk countries. By the first days of January, experts around the world were learning of a mysterious virus coming out of China.
The disease could be contagious.
Symptoms similar to pneumonia.
the WHO not ruling out a coronavirus.
It was an entirely new, highly contagious strain of coronavirus, many times more lethal than the common flu.
China's health commission is warning the ability of the deadly coronavirus to spread is getting stronger.
Spreading across Asia.
The virus has now reached Europe.
This virus is going to spread and spread quickly over the next week,
with an increasing number of patients confirmed across the globe.
It wasn't a question of if it would hit the U.S., but when. In the face of a pandemic, there's a critical window to act. If you miss it, containment becomes exponentially more difficult.
This disease was spreading and doubling roughly every 3 days in the U.S.
We're in great shape. We have it totally under control. And this is their new hoax.
With each passing day, the spread of the virus was accelerating, but a lack of testing made it nearly impossible to track.
Centers for Disease Control took steps to develop a diagnostic, but in a way that is unprecedented, failed. And the failure to produce a diagnostic is just historic.
We don't have enough tests today to meet what we anticipate will be the demand.
The tests that were out in the field, 1/3 of them, I believe, were flawed, and we're coming back with false negatives.
Through the better part of February, we had a virus introduced and circulating in the United States that we clearly had no idea where it was, who it was infecting, just how prevalent it was, and it left us extraordinarily vulnerable.
But inside the White House, the main concern was an unfinished trade deal with China.
That goes in line with the president's platform of trade and jobs and the economy. Those were his strongest points and things that he was very proud of during his presidency. So, of course, they were not going to rock the boat on this.
The number of known infections across Asia has more than quadrupled.
Look at that right there. Wall Street ending one of the worst weeks of trading since the financial crisis in 2008.
I remember a lot of people gathered around the TV and watching the stock market drop.
The risk to the American people remains very low.
That is when you see Vice President Pence get tapped to lead the task force. They felt that they needed someone credible, someone to lead inside the White House.
The important thing to note about leadership changes is while it might not seem like a big deal, you lose some time every time someone else is put in charge of the response. There are a lot of people who pointed out that if that unit had been in place as soon as coronavirus hit, it would have been clear that the National Security Council should take the lead and that this would have been run out of the White House right away.
At a point in moment when we knew that an event like this was going to demand extraordinary services from our health practitioners, that we knew that the need for personal protective equipment, the need for diagnostics were going to be the difference between success or failure. The United States government largely did nothing.
March 11th, the WHO announces that COVID-19 is now a worldwide pandemic.
Shoppers are finding empty shelves, long lines, and limits on purchases.
By spring break, there are still no national social distancing guidelines in the U.S., and Americans are left to operate as normal. At first, Trump blamed China.
China virus, or whatever you want to call it.
Then Obama. But in the spring, he found a new target, the states.
That we direct a statewide order for people to stay at home.
You've suggested these governors are at fault. What more in this time of
Well, I think we've done a great job. We will hold the governors accountable. He's got you in a shutdown, still.
This gave him cover to push for reopening without a national plan for containment.
President Trump is pushing ahead with his plan to reopen the country.
The greatest economy in the history of the world, and we closed it.
Trump announced that the 6-week-long restriction will not be extended.
There's no end in sight to the health crisis.
By June, almost every other country was bending its curve. Cases in the U.S. at that time were surging.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
The ultimate responsibility of the President of the United States is to safeguard the well-being of the American people.
We will defeat the virus, end the pandemic, and emerge stronger than ever before.